Hi, I don't even know where to begin. Maybe because I've never said this out loud before. Maybe because it still feels fragile. Like if I speak it, it becomes too real. But I need to say it because it changed me. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it too. My name is Emily. I'm 23 years old, and until recently, my life was quiet. Not boring, just peaceful, predictable. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew your name and your parents' names too. There was one bakery, one movie theater, and one bus route that everyone hated but still used. I lived with my mom and dad in a little blue house with a porch swing that always creaked in the wind. And to me, that house felt like the safest place on earth. My mom was the soft kind. She smelled like lavender and read mystery novels before bed. She hummed while she cooked and kissed the top of my head whenever she walked by. And my dad? My dad was the sun in our home. Loud, warm, full of life. He had this deep, booming laugh that echoed through the walls. He called me kiddo and made up bedtime stories that always had dragons and flying goats for some reason. He taught me how to ride a bike, with one hand, no less, because he wanted me to feel brave. When I scraped my knee, he told me the scar would make me look cool. And when I failed my first math test, he didn't scold me. He made flashcards with cartoon faces on them and helped me every night until numbers made sense. On weekends, we'd go to the lake. He'd pack the world's worst sandwiches, dry bread, mystery meat, but I loved them anyway. Because we'd sit under the same old tree and talk about everything and nothing. At night, he tucked me in, every single night. Even when I was 16 and thought I was too old for that, he'd still knock and say, "Good night, kiddo. Love you more than peanut butter." And I'd say, "Gross, Dad." But secretly, I loved it. We weren't rich. We didn't go on fancy vacations or own a big screen TV. But I had something better. I had love. I had parents who made me feel like I was the center of their universe. So when I say that what happened next shook my world, I want you to understand. It wasn't just about what I found. It was about what I believed and what it meant to lose that belief. But I'll get to that. Let me start with the moment everything changed. It happened in early spring, the kind of spring that still feels like winter, where the wind bites through your jacket and the sky refuses to be blue. My mom collapsed in the kitchen. I wasn't there. I was at work, answering phones, trying to stay awake, thinking about what to make for dinner. The call came in at 2:17 p.m. My neighbor's number lit up on the screen. At first, I didn't believe it. How could I? She was only 54. She walked every morning, ate salads, took vitamins. She wasn't supposed to just be gone. But strokes don't care about plans or how many books you haven't finished yet. The funeral was quiet. She hated attention, so we kept it small. A few close friends, some dried flowers, and a playlist she'd made years ago, full of songs that didn't quite match the mood, but somehow felt perfect anyway. I remember standing there, looking at the urn, thinking, she's still my mom, even if I can't hear her voice anymore. After she passed, everything in the house felt like her. The half-used lotion by the sink, the bookmarks in her novels, the way her handwriting curled on sticky notes still stuck to the fridge. And I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it. For 3 weeks, I left it all as it was. Then one morning, I walked into the guest room. Her closet had always been a mess. Boxes stacked high, winter clothes mixed with photo albums, holiday decorations stuffed wherever they'd fit. I figured, if I didn't start somewhere, I'd never start at all. So I opened the door and began digging through the chaos. Old scarves, wrapping paper, a broken lamp, nothing surprising. Until I reached the far back, behind the thick quilts she never used. There, buried deep, was a shoebox. Plain, dusty gray. The lid was taped shut. Not recently. The tape had yellowed and cracked like it had been sealed for years. I don't know why, but my heart started racing. It felt personal, hidden. I sat on the floor, box in my lap, and peeled back the brittle tape. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some in envelopes, others just folded. None addressed to me, none written in my father's handwriting. The top one was dated over 2 decades ago, and it began with a sentence I will never forget. To my daughter, I hope someday you read this. I hope someday you understand. At first I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the letter wasn't meant for me. Maybe it was fiction, something my mom had written and tucked away. But the more I read, the more impossible that theory became. The handwriting wasn't familiar. The tone was too real, too raw. And the signature at the bottom? Daniel R. Blake. A name I had never heard before. He wrote about my mother like someone who knew her deeply. Not just on the surface, but the kind of knowing that lives in memory and regret. He talked about how they met, college, sophomore year, how she laughed at his terrible jokes, how she always wore a yellow scarf in the rain, how she made him feel seen for the first time in his life. They fell in love. Quickly, intensely. But when she told him she was pregnant, he panicked. He was 20, no job, no plan, no courage. So he ran. He left her alone to raise a child, me, without even saying goodbye. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because 23 years ago, just before I was born, he wrote that letter. He said he wanted to be part of my life, that he regretted everything, that he knew he didn't deserve to be called a father, but hoped one day I might know he existed. There were more letters, each one full of pieces, fragments of a man who wanted to be present, but never had the strength to actually show up. He wrote about birthdays he missed, school dances he never saw, report cards he'd never read. It was like he'd imagined my entire life from a distance, a ghost trying to feel like a father through ink and paper. And as I read them, I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Guilt? I wasn't sure why guilt even showed up. But it did. Because part of me wondered, had I missed something? Had I spent my whole life not knowing a truth that somehow defined me? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I laid awake, letters spread around me, heart pounding, eyes burning. Who was Daniel R. Blake? And more importantly, who was the man I'd been calling Dad my entire life? Was he my real father? Did he know? Had everyone been lying to me? I didn't know what scared me more, the secrets in the letters, or the possibility that they weren't secrets at all. The next morning, I sat across from my dad at the kitchen table. Sunlight was creeping in through the blinds, slicing the room into stripes of gold and shadow. He was sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone like it was any normal day. But to me, everything felt different. I was holding the letter in my hands. My fingers were trembling, even though I tried to keep them still. "Dad?" I said. He looked up immediately, his eyes soft, alert. He must have heard something in my voice. "Do you know someone named Daniel Blake?" The pause that followed said more than any words ever could. His shoulders lowered, his breath caught, and for the first time in my life, my father looked tired, really tired. He nodded slowly, and then said the words that would stay with me forever. I knew this day would come. He didn't get angry. He didn't deny it. He didn't even ask how I found out. He just began. He told me everything. How he met my mom when she was already 3 months pregnant. How she told him the truth right away. How she gave him the choice to stay or walk away. And he chose to stay, not because he had to, not because he felt trapped, but because, as he said, Arisain, I loved her. And when you were born, I loved you too. He said he never once thought of me as anything other than his daughter. Not for a second. Not even when people asked if we looked alike. Not even when the doctor's forms said adoptive guardian in tiny print. To him, I was his, because he chose me. And somehow, that truth hit me harder than anything in those letters ever did. I asked him if it had been hard, if it had been painful, knowing I wasn't his. He smiled, a sad, proud kind of smile. And he said, "No, it was never hard loving you. It was only hard knowing one day. You might wonder why." That broke me, not because it was tragic, but because it was so deeply selfless. He didn't try to erase my past. He didn't try to compete with Daniel Blake. He simply stood in the space that man had left behind and filled it with love. Real love. The kind that isn't loud. The kind that shows up day after day, even when no one's watching. The kind of love that changes everything. Quietly. The days that followed felt strange, not dramatic, not loud, just quietly altered. Like the air had changed pressure and I couldn't quite breathe the same way. I kept going back to the letters, reading them, trying to understand this man, this stranger who had written to me before I was even born. Daniel's words were full of regret, but also of hope. He wanted to be seen, to be forgiven, and I wondered, would I have forgiven him if he had shown up at my 10th birthday party? If he had knocked on our door when I was 5 and asked to be part of my life? Would I have let him in? It's a question I'll never be able to answer because he never tried. He had his chance. He chose silence. And my dad, the man who packed my lunches, who taught me to parallel park, who waited outside in the freezing cold during every school play, he chose me, even when he didn't have to. And isn't that what parenthood really is? Not a matter of biology, but of choice. I used to think being a daughter meant sharing DNA, but now I know it means being raised in someone's arms, being taught how to be kind, how to be strong, how to keep going when things break. It means band-aids and hugs. It means lectures when you mess up, and forgiveness when you mess up again. It means someone sitting in the passenger seat on your first highway drive, gripping the door handle like their life depends on it, but never asking to get out. That's what my dad gave me. Not just protection, but presence. And when I think about identity, about who I am, I don't think of Daniel Blake. I think of early mornings and late-night car rides, of silly songs and awkward dancing, of warm pancakes and cold hands tying my skates. I think of my dad because he built the foundation I stand on. Every part of me, the strong parts, the soft parts, the parts still figuring it out came from being his daughter. And maybe I wasn't his in blood, but I was his in every other way that matters. I never told my dad I found all the letters. He knew. I know he did. But we never spoke about it again, and in some strange way, that was enough. Because the story I thought I needed, the truth about where I came from, wasn't the one that mattered most. The real story was the one he wrote with his actions. With every early morning drop-off. Every soccer game he cheered too loudly at. Every moment he stayed. It took me a while to understand that. I used to think my life had a missing piece. That there was some invisible hole in my identity because I didn't know my biological father. But I was wrong. The truth is, I wasn't missing anything. I was just carrying a piece I didn't know how to name. Love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need a label or explanation. The kind that doesn't ask for credit. The kind that shows up and keeps showing up. One night, weeks later, I stood outside in the yard. The wind was soft, the stars were out, and I whispered, "Thank you." I don't know if it was to my mom or to my dad, or maybe just to the universe for giving me exactly who I needed, even if the details were complicated. Because family isn't just who brings you into the world. It's who walks beside you through it, who holds your hand when you're scared, who waits outside your door when you slam it shut, who never lets go, even when you push them away. My dad did all of that, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And that's what makes him my father. Not genetics, not birthright, but love. So if you're listening to this and you've ever wondered about your own identity, if you felt like there's something missing or like you're not sure who you really are, I hope you remember this. You are not defined by the people who leave. You are shaped by the ones who stay, the ones who love you, show up for you, choose you again and again. That's where the truth lives. And that is where you'll find who you really are.